I thought coming into this, it was going to be the show's greatest weakness, but instead it ended up being one of the show's greatest strengths. The finale of Skeleton Crew was quite surprising, but not in the way that you might think. No, I wasn't surprised to see the identity of the supervisor. No, I wasn't surprised to see that Jod Nanawa did not have a redemption arc. In fact, many of the things that happened in this final episode were very predictable, and most of them we've seen coming from a mile away. But even with that being the case, there were quite a few things that made me really enjoy this finale. And I believe that this show is a great success for Star Wars, including its flaws and all. But even having said that, there's one major problem hanging over all of it.
Force will be with you.
Welcome to the Force Fandom, a channel for regular fans who love Star Wars. Today we're going to be jumping into all things Skeleton Crew finale. I'm going to give you some of my thoughts, some of my theories, thoughts where this could go if it gets a season 2, but I don't think it's going to. And we're going to look at all of those things, so make sure you hit that like button and let's get started. The thing that surprised me the most about this finale is really the fact that it stuck the landing. Most Disney shows, particularly Star Wars shows, don't do that. They might start with something really good and then they kind of peter off towards the end, and oftentimes don't end well, with maybe the exception being Mandalorian Season 2. Otherwise, everything is kind of forgettable. We've seen the drop off in most shows because you can't keep the attention and the story just kind of gets muddled and things fall apart. That wasn't the case with Skeleton Crew. Now, that isn't to say that there weren't disappointments from this show and this episode particularly overall. I think there were a lot of interesting storylines, plot lines, mysteries that were set up, and quite frankly, really none of them did we get a payoff in this episode. We didn't really get more about At-Aten. The reveal of the supervisor being a droid was kind of like, well, that's what we all thought. There were 3 lines of dialogue, though, that I think did have a pretty huge impact, and it's when Jod said this.
When I was your age, all I cared about was not starving. I was living in a hole in the ground, and a Jedi found me. She may have been desperate and ragged like me, but she told me I had potential. And that was... well... she only taught me a little before they hunted her down, and they made me watch whilst they killed her.
And I don't think it can be overstated here how important this scene was. We get the backstory of Jod Nanawa. We find out that he's not an Order 66 survivor, but instead there's a deeper pain and a deeper sense in what's happening. You even see him almost remember fondly being told positively that he had potential, almost as if this is the thing that we're seeing in these kids that is being suppressed by the great work, kind of being funneled into all these different jobs. They forget that the galaxy is open and wide, or they don't even know, and that there is such great potential for each and every one of them. And this is something that Jod was learning the hard lesson of, that no one had probably showed him care and love before. And I can't imagine how traumatizing it is to have someone rescue you out of that poverty, rescue you out of that situation, to train you to see something good in you when everyone else has told you there's nothing good in you, and then that's taken away. It makes sense. His story and character arc completely makes sense. And I think in just 3 lines of exposition, we get a whole open-ended backstory. And there's the key. It's open-ended. They didn't do a flashback. They didn't have to run through all these things. They haven't told us who it is or narrowed it down to something that could be lore breaking. And they've left it just kind of maybe one of these untold stories from a Jedi who was hunted down after Order 66. He doesn't go into detail how long he was taking care of her, how long that relationship went. And we can just be left to think about that. That's fantastic. I will say at least they did give us that backstory, but the other things, the connection between the other planets, the how everything had been this way, it's just really not that much, because at the heart of it, really, this is just a kid's show. So what were we going to expect? Maybe that's my fault for getting my expectations up too high once the show looks pretty good. But there is one element of this that just actually kind of blew me away when I was watching this last episode. And I can't say it clearly or loudly enough, because I thought coming into this, it was going to be the show's greatest weakness, but instead it ended up being one of the show's greatest strengths. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the acting of these kids. I expected Jude Law to be Jude Law. I expected Jude to shine on screen, and he really did steal pretty much every scene that he was in. But to see these other young actors and actresses really do a phenomenal job. Now, yes, I think there were some cringe moments, but looking back on it, I think a lot of the cringe moments were more by design, were put there intentionally, or they were told to act in that certain way. And we saw the acting of these kids, particularly in this interacting and this trying to decide with, am I going to be the hero? Am I coming back to my planet and to be the hero that my planet needs because everyone else around me isn't going to do it? We see that moment with Wim, we see that moment with Fern, we see that moment with Neil, and we see that moment with KB, all in this episode. They each have a moment where they say, I'm going to risk everything, possibly even my life, to save those I care about. And isn't that the most Star Wars thing? Isn't that just like Luke Skywalker to say that I'm going to risk what I have? I'm going to risk everything for the good of others. And it's this kind of journey that these kids have been on. It's what they've learned, that they don't have to be afraid in the face of danger, that they can risk for the ones they care about. And I think it's just some of those underlying motifs that really make this show work. So even though there were things that I wish this episode had given us that had done more than what we got was really good. But there's a problem, and I said it, there's still a major problem, and I said this 2 months ago before this show came out, that it's just not going to matter. It doesn't matter. None of it matters. It doesn't matter if Skeleton Crew is as good as it is. It won't move the needle. It won't do anything. Not enough people are watching Skeleton Crew. We're seeing that clearly. I don't believe this is going to get a second season, though I think it deserves one, maybe just as much as Andor deserved one, way more than any of the other shows. I'd much rather see a second season of Skeleton Crew than a second season of Ahsoka, though I'm not quite sure where they would go. There's one thought I have. I think I'm going to save that for another video, so make sure you subscribe. I think I know where they could go if they make that pitch. But ultimately, I think that the sad part about all of this is the Disney brand has really destroyed Star Wars. A show like this coming out 7, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, I think would have had a lot of traction. I think would have been as popular as Mandalorian 1 and 2 were. I think it would have captivated people more, even coming off of some of the problems with the sequel trilogy. But after the horrible treatment of Obi-Wan, after the horrible treatment of Boba Fett and Acolyte and everything else, fans are done. And it's unfortunate because I thought this was a really good show. I was genuinely surprised how much I enjoyed even this last episode, where I wanted more stuff. But instead, what I got was some pretty good acting, some pretty great visuals, and an enjoyable time. And if I'm being honest, I think that's good. I think that's good enough. I don't know. Tell me what you think down in the comments below. If you want to see more about Skeleton Crew, I've got some more videos coming out, so make sure you hit subscribe for that, and I'll catch you on the next one. Remember, the Force will be with you always.